it gets dangerous. It really does. You got to be careful what you're taking in, who you're around. On the other side too, we're not like, I would not be the one to sit here and say, quit everything you're doing, pursue your dream and just figure it out. Like there's people out there who say that. So it's like, well, how do you find that middle ground? And that's what we really look for whenever I coach somebody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Top Down Podcast. My name is Josh Mastel, your host and the CEO of Uproar Partners, where we work with CEOs and tech founders all across the country, helping them accelerate their sales. My guest today on this podcast, someone I'm extremely excited about. His name is Ryan Borawski. The guy is one of the most genuine, hardcore, positive, thoughtful, educated people that I know. He's just one of my favorite people on earth. He owns his own life coaching business where he's personally coached over 200 people in their careers and their finances and relationships and health and leadership, their impact on society. And his mission in life is to really help other people just make sure they're living the most extraordinary life that they possibly can. So I'm really excited to have him. He's going to give us some really good nuggets today. One of the greatest takeaways that you're going to hear is his 4-step process for what you can do to remove the limiting beliefs in your mind that may be holding you back from living a well-rounded, happy, and mega successful life. I don't want you to miss it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get right into it now. All right, cool. Hey, welcome to the Top Down Podcast. My name is Josh Mastel, your host. We have a really exciting guest today, actually a really dear friend of mine, super sharp guy, Ryan Borawski joining us. Ryan, welcome to the Top Down Podcast, my man.
Josh, I'm pumped to be here. And I know I talked about earlier, I put it on my story. I said we're going to talk about winning in life and business.
Love that.
I'm thinking we just ditch that and we talk about winning in bowling against Justin Timberlake. I saw that in your bio. So love to learn more about that throughout this conversation.
That's a story for another time, but it is true. Just a matter of weeks ago, I did beat Justin Timberlake in bowling. So I always got to talk some trash about that.
Honestly, I don't know if anyone on this call believes that, but we'll see. I didn't even know Justin could lose in anything, so I'm a little concerned. But anyways.
Touche. Let's dive right into this, my man. So, I just shared in the pre-roll here a little bit of, in the intro here, a little bit of information about you, but I think it might set the stage a bit just to give us the 2-minute, like the cocktail dinner. Hey, Ryan, what do you do? What are you up to these days? Like, explain to the crowd here what Ryan Borawski is all about.
Awesome. Yeah. So my main job when it comes to what I'm going to be speaking to today is working with an insurance company. So I train sales representatives all around the country. That's a virtual job. I also have a side coaching business that I've been running for 6 months now. And that is focused on, honestly, a lot of it comes to me in terms of career, but we look at the entire picture. So we'll look at relationships, finances, emotional health, physical health, and I coach people throughout that process. So that's been a big focus of mine after hours, after the 9 to 5.
Love that, man. Awesome. Thanks for setting that stage for us. So I'm super passionate about just like being exceptional. I love talking with exceptional people like yourself. I think we live in a world where average is acceptable a lot of times, and I hate that. So the question I want to open up with you is, what if you had to pick one attribute that you think successful people or winners have in common, and you only could pick one, what attribute would you choose?
Yes, I love that question. Real quick, I do have to give a little personal side. I got a beautiful wife, Ashley, and a dog named Callie. For those of you on the call and listen to the podcast, I wouldn't be able to get away with that one. So yeah, on that question, I love that question. And for this reason, I think it's something that everybody searches for. But beyond that, I like to define winner a little bit differently than a lot of people do. To me, a winner is somebody who performs long-term at a high level. So I really do believe that we can all short-term find the willpower to complete a task or to meet a goal, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, max maybe, to get that willpower. I'm looking for long-term sustainability. So now when we study people who have done things at a high level, long-term success, here's what I've found. They all have a mission that's greater than themselves. They have that sense of contribution where they're giving beyond themselves, which is a human need that we have. We have to have the feeling that we are giving beyond ourselves, or else spiritually we won't feel fulfilled. So when you look at that, I find those individuals have that mission beyond themselves. I have a really good example if you want to go through one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Very timely.
That was my next question. That was my next question. Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So we're right around the Super Bowl, right? It's coming up this weekend. So when you look at Tom Brady, everyone's talking about him right now. How is he performing at a high level, at such a high level? Well, he is on a mission. And when you look at what Tom is trying to build, in fact, he has a brand, TB12, which is a lifestyle brand. And if you were to look it up, it would say we're here to empower athletes doing the things they love for longer and to prevent injury. That is his brand. That's his mission, right? What makes that strong, though, is that his identity is extremely congruent to that mission and his beliefs. The most powerful force in life is when we have a mission that's congruent with our identity and our beliefs. So now when you look at Tom, for somebody who thinks he's going to go to that Super Bowl and try to win it as his number one priority, they're wrong. That's an effect, but it's not the cause, right? The cause is the mission. So he's lacing up his cleats. So that way, when he's out there performing at a high level, all of these athletes all around the world are inspired and empowered by him. That's a different level of motivation. That's how you sustain something long term. So think about now all the preparation and all the film study and all the hard work that has to go into that. That takes care of itself, because when you aim at that contribution beyond yourself, the results will be there because you have the effect. The rest is the cause.
Love that. So let's say, most of our listeners on this podcast they're business owners, they're sales leaders, maybe some salespeople that they want to be excellent and they want to do what Tom Brady is doing, but they're not professional athletes, right? So let's bring this into like the business world, or what we would, kind of the regular world of a non-professional athlete. And someone was interested in the topic of, man, I'd love to have a mission. But I don't know what that is, right? Like, where do you start?
All right. So this is the $1 million question. How do you develop this mission? I work with my clients all the time on this. And you think, here's some strategies that we can look at, but it takes much more than this. And what I mean by that is, if I said, Josh, what's your mission? It's very natural for us to consciously just talk about a mission that we have that is, I would say, somebody else's mission or what our parents told us we should do. And you could sense it in somebody's voice. It's like a press conference. They're telling you what somebody has told them to say, like, we're on to the next game. People create missions that way. It's complete BS. So first thing you need to do is look inward, and you really need to spend some time making sure that you are knowing who you are, you're true to yourself, and you really understand who you are. So some of the things you can do to do that: one, look at your passions. That's big. What have you always loved to do? A question that I always ask my clients is, what solution or problem do you want to solve? Who do you most want to help? These are all questions you write down, and it's you, four walls, and a piece of paper and a pad of paper. And you just write this down and you think. And the second your conscious mind tries to come in and say, no, that's not your mission, you have to block that out. Now, that's a whole different strategy where we take plenty of coaching calls just spending time trying to do that. But if you can get clear on that, now you're developing that identity. And now that you know your identity, you can then create that mission. And again, we talked about the most powerful force is having those aligned if you're looking to sustain long-term success. So an example of that could be, well, I've always valued helping other people. I've always valued taking somebody who is not in the ideal circumstances and bringing them to those circumstances. Well, that could then be your identity, and a mission could be, I want to help 500,000 people raise their circumstances by providing clothing and water to some segment of society. You see how that?
Sure. Do you think the mission always has to be giving back to someone else? Like, is that? It seems to be a theme of what you're talking about.
It has to be beyond yourself, and by no means needs to be, I'm here to solve world hunger. But it has to be beyond yourself, because that's a human need. If somebody is in a position right now, let's walk through this scenario. They have a job. I deal with this all the time. And their company has a mission, right? Every company, for the most part, has a mission. And that mission could be great. Like, it could be a mission that's going to solve world hunger. If your identity does not align with that, you're not going to be fulfilled in your job. And success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure, right?
Yeah.
So cool. Again, it's identity. It doesn't matter how great that. Listen, if I'm sitting in Tom Brady's TB12's room, I like working out and everything. but that's not my identity. I'm not sitting there lacing it up to make sure that I empower athletes everywhere. Doesn't mean his mission's bad. It just means we're not on the same page. It's very tough to sustain that model long term and still be fulfilled. So it has to be beyond you, but it doesn't have to be some crazy mission, if that makes sense.
Love it. Love it, man. So I'm, like I mentioned earlier, I'm passionate about exceptional people. And I'm really caught up on this word exceptional right now because I forget what I was listening to a couple months back. I think it might've been Grant Cardone, who I'm just really a fan of his swagger, and I just like him. But I think he said, if I were to give any advice to anybody in the world, especially young people, it would be to be exceptional in whatever way it is. Like, I don't care what way you need to be exceptional as a person, but be exceptional. When someone meets you, you want them to walk away saying, man, that person is an exceptional fill in the blanks. You're someone that I think is an exceptional person in terms of the amount of knowledge you take in, what you're doing in terms of giving back and helping a lot of people out. I want to know where that comes from. Like, is there a story or something that's happened to you that impacted you to make you the way that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I was living the opposite of what I just talked about. So I didn't have a mission. I was a winner, high performer in my job, did really well, hit all my goals, but it was a short-term model, right? It wasn't a big picture mission model. So one of the things that really had a big impact on my life, which is what I walk through all my clients with, Alexander Kloss, shout out. He was one of my mentors in college. And I gave him a call and I was like, hey, I have success. I don't have fulfillment. I've been told this is the ultimate failure. So I think I'm a failure right now. And he goes, all right, let's walk through an activity. And what he did is, number one, I'll never forget it. He said, think with your heart, not with your head, which was very difficult for me. It still is. You still have to continue to remind yourself. But then he walked through what he calls the wheel of life, and it's out there in the self-help world. And what it is just going through all aspects of your life, starting with physical health, emotional, career, you're looking at finances, leadership, and impact, and you just draw a wheel and you rate yourself on those categories. And what you do is you identify how imbalanced you are on all of those. And then you start to question, like, what am I here for? Like, if I'm great in my career, but I don't speak to my wife, or I'm miserable when I come home, like, what's the end game goal, right? And so that activity gave me that holistic view to where when I work with clients, I send it to them in a visual form. And they'll look at it and say, wow, like, that is very eye-opening, right? So the goal is to then take that and make sure that you're balanced in those categories. And that activity right there, to me, like, it clicked. It was like, all right.
Do you have to have balance? Like,
you have to have awareness of your balance. I'm not saying you have to have perfect balance, but you cannot be blind to areas of your life and expect to be fulfilled long-term. So look at, a big push that my wife and I had the last few years was getting out of debt. When you are focused on getting out of debt, you are imbalanced. I can tell you that. Relationships may suffer. You may have to say no to Josh if he asks you to go out, but you're aware that this isn't long-term, right? You're aware that I'm getting here for this reason, but then I'll get back in balance. The problem is we're blind the whole time. And then what's the end game goal? I don't know. It's scary, but people live that way.
You know, I'm curious of your perspective on, I know you're a big Tony Robbins guy, and I like a lot of his stuff too. And I think a lot about, he says a lot how the human brain is pre-programmed from, the things that happened to you as a kid and you're growing up, you're pre-programmed to act. And I call them like sheep or zombies. You're kind of just walking around as your pre-programmed self, not even thinking about things. What's your take on that, and like how someone gets control of that you're in the change business, right? You're like a life coach. Their job is to help people change. How do you rewire?
How do you rewire? That is like that's all I do when I work with clients is we try to get an idea of, one, going to your point on Tony Robbins, he calls it NLP, which is one of the studies of sciences that he's done for the longest time. And I've been spending a lot of time on that. And he's right. Essentially what you're doing in that scenario is you are wired. You're wired a certain way based off of your experiences. And it's no different than a default mode on a computer. That's how we're wired. And a lot of times it's out of love, right? So like we could be wired from our parents. We could be wired unconsciously from sibling rivalries. One of the things he does is he'll try to get an idea of how you're wired. And a question that Tony will ask is, whose love did you crave the most growing up? It's such a simple question. And people will say, well, my father or my mother or my brother or my sister. Well, what did you have to do to get their love? We know love's a basic human need. I needed to perform extremely high in all levels of things and hold myself at a standard of perfection. Okay. So talk to me again. Why are you coming to me here today? I have high anxiety. I don't know how I'm going to be able to keep up with this standard that I have. I just won a championship. I just got a promotion. And I'm just like, how do I keep this? I need more and I need more. First step is recognizing, was that original source, was that a reflection of who you are, right? Like, is that a condition of where you were at? And is that a way you should hold yourself to? So you have to identify it. And then after that, I call it working out. You have to go hard at trying to change that with pattern interrupts, with conditioning your mind. And you have 27, 30 years of this workout. And we're 2 weeks into our coaching, like we're in the brand new stages of this. So now we want to figure out where you want to go, how it's holding you back. And it's just like lifting a 2.5 pound dumbbell. And you just have to do it, then jump to 5. And that's the whole conditioning of the mind. And that changes. There's times when people come to me and I say, I won't talk about your career. I won't talk about your finances. I won't talk about any of that until we address this problem. Because until you change this default mode, none of that matters.
Sure. Any tangible like exercises? I'm trying to picture myself as a listener right now. That's like, shoot, maybe I have a high anxiety and I know it's because as a kid, XYZ that we just described, or maybe I know I'm in debt and I want to get out of it. Like, is there anything without, obviously the goal would be go hire a life coach and have someone help you out. But if they couldn't or didn't, what are some things people could be doing on their own to educate themselves, help themselves, do some positive exercises in their brain?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, if you have a headache, what are you going to take for it? You have to find the solution. You have to find the antidote to that. So the number one thing is naming it. What is the feeling? Is it guilt? Is it fear? Is it perfection? Is it wanting to be a peacemaker? What is that? And then what is the solution? So if you have high anxiety, well, what are some things we could do practically to get you out of that? And what I'll do is I'll work with the client and I'll say, try this. And essentially all we're doing is just testing it out. And I'll have the next call and say, how did it work? And I feel unbelievable. Boom. All right. We know one of them worked, right? Did you try this? Yeah, that worked. Did you try this? I did. I didn't get the best result from that. Okay. And what we do is continue to refine that. So it's so tough for me to answer that without knowing the actual root cause. But after that, all it is diagnosing it and then putting in meditation, breathing, thought processes that are different, affirmations, whatever it may be, and it changes.
Love that. All right. So let me ask you this question. You as someone, I think about this a lot too, as like I lead a team of people and I've always been involved in that world of leading a bunch of people. And I love that. It's like, I think that's what we're talking about missions. That's a mission of mine, is I love building teams and that kind of thing. But when you're always the coach or you're always the one giving the help and being the support system, there's sometimes, I'm assuming in your life, that you're like, shoot, it'd be nice to have someone I could lean on. Like, what I would like to get into your world. Like, what do you do to hold yourself accountable to some of these things personally? Or when you're down and you need someone to go to, what do you do?
Yeah, I have a couple different strategies on that. I have a coach, which helps hold you accountable because it, again, just fills in those blind spots. I plug into a lot of self-help stuff, and you'd be amazed how much you could apply just from that. I mean, you talked about Tony Robbins. When he walks through some of that, you're like, me, like, and here's the solution, so just do it. And at the end of the day, like, there's no matter how much you put around you, you have to make that decision to decide. So that is huge. And that's up to you. It's not up to anybody else. So the biggest thing is educating yourself on it, and then you make that decision. That being said, you can never succeed alone, right? Like, there's times when I ask Ashley for advice all the time. Honestly, she's probably a better life coach than I am. And like, she'll just fill in my blind spots and I'll be like, I never even thought about that. Or I'll ask a coworker, or I'll ask, somebody else that I'm working with in a group, in this segment or whatever. So go to other people on that. But at the end of the day, you got to identify and you have to decide. Tony always says, the word decide means to cut off all other possibilities. So when you say, I am deciding to lose 15 pounds, if you're making that decision, you're cutting off all other possibilities, which means those 15 pounds are gone, but you got to decide, right?
Yeah. He tells a story about, I would butcher it if I tried to tell it, but the historical story or the history war story of burning the ships.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I forget
Yeah.
Cortez or something like that. When they took the island, they burned the ship so the soldiers had nowhere to retreat to. I think about that when you mention that. I mean, I love that. I love that story.
Yeah, you're buying in, you're making that decision, right? So even like metaphorically speaking, when you say you're burning the ships, it means I've fully committed to this is what I'm doing. Now, this brings up a whole different thing. When I'm coaching people, vocabulary is so important, and listening to what people say and looking at their eyes and reading their verbal or their nonverbal communication, because that tells you much more than even sometimes their words. So there's a difference between, Josh, I hope this call goes well, or Josh, I expect this to go well. And I'm working on taking it to that next level, because that is next level coaching, like where people's eyes go when they're talking and things like that. That is all NLP, which Tony would talk about. And that's big too when you're working with somebody, is like, what is their level of intensity and how is that going to lead to a true decision? And sometimes it's not.
I love that. It reminds me of it's if you're on the live feed, it's over my shoulder, but my mentor, who actually lost this year, which is as sad as that is, he always used to say, do or do not, there is no try.
Yeah,
I love that, man. I love it. Like, cause there's nothing worse than you tell someone, hey, let's get this done this week. All right, I'll try to get that done. He would slap you in the ass every time and say, nope, do or do not. Right. There is no try.
That's it. Commit one way or the other, right?
Love it, dude. Love it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to dive in. I'm a big routine guy. I'm assuming you're a pretty disciplined. I was raised by a military dad, so like I was always pretty disciplined in terms of routine. I'd like to know what your morning routine is. I think that's like a topic a lot of people are interested in. How do you attack your mornings?
So I read the book Miracle Morning. If anybody is looking to get a better morning routine, we lived in Utah at the time, which was over the summer. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And really what it comes down to is journaling is one thing that I started. So I got my journal right here. And it's got my mission statement in there, which I created. It's got my goals that I read every single morning. And then on the journaling side, what I do is I've made the decision is I read a Bible verse or any part of it every day. I write down how I'm going to apply it. That's kind of like my lead domino, is going into the faith side of things. Then from there, I'll journal reflections from the day before or anything that's just on my mind. And then after that, it is a like yoga session or physical health in some way. And sometimes that switches around. Like if I need to get to a workout, I'll do that first, but I bring that part of it back into it. It's just a really good way to get grounded and to get yourself going for the day. So that has been 6 months I've been doing that, and it's been extremely helpful.
Love it.
Huge.
Yeah, I think win in the morning is super important. I totally agree with that. So let's dive into the business side of what you do. Like, run us through who's an ideal person that should have a life coach. How do you first engage with someone when they come to you? What are those sessions like? How often do you guys kind of run us through how that all looks and what?
Yep. So that is honestly at the core of it. It's somebody who doesn't feel like they're maximizing their potential. Like if you are sitting there and you're like, I'm leaving something behind in some area of my life. That's what it is. Because then from there, the question is, what is it? What's the gap? Where do you want to go? And then that's where I'll come in and really help them along that journey. Everybody has the answers. A coach helps you find those answers. So that would be it. I've had a lot of career focus. I think just around our age, a lot of people are wondering, hey, I'm not super fulfilled with my career. Should I settle here? Should I look for something different? That's been a big one. Anxiety. So somebody who's just trying to deal with expectations that may be placed on them, or maybe in a leadership role in a business or on a sports team, and how you're going to deal with that. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you are not fully feeling like you are living up to your potential, that's who I work with. And then we get right into it. Like call number one, it's like, hey, I'm Ryan. Here's my background. Boom. What are you looking for? What's missing? What do we need to change? How do we get there?
Love that. Okay. So you mentioned something a topic I'm passionate about. I want to hear your opinion on. And it's that a lot of people you work with, they are unhappy at work. They're unhappy with their careers. And I see it everywhere too. Like, I forget what the stat is. I think you spend 1/3 of your life at work, and I forget what the percentage is, but there's an unbelievable amount of people that are miserable in their job. Like, what's your take on all that? What's the root cause of all that? And what's some good advice you could give someone that's, it's stuck in that position?
Okay. So the biggest thing is don't accept that. Number one. That you're right. The numbers show us that so many people drive to work every single day and aren't fulfilled. If you're on this call and you're in that spot, a quick exercise to walk through. Very easy. You look at your top talent, strength, and skills. What is something Josh has always done better than anybody else? Ask people, have them validate that. Write that in the left-hand column. Right-hand column, what are your top passions? From a child to now, what are things that when you've done it, time has flown by? The two things that I tell everybody is what engages you and what energizes you. You could get engaged by something. I can be engaged by this podcast, but afterwards I could be burnt out. I can tell you that's not the case. I'm just going to continue to go wild after this because this fires me up. So if you can find an activity that engages you and energizes you, put that in your passion column. What you do then is you take your top talents, skills, and strengths, your top passions, where those intersect is where you can create a mission. And something as simple as I'm really good at speaking to people, training and teaching, and I have a passion for helping the youth, get out of tough situations. Look at some jobs in that category. Practically, you can put those skills, talents, and strengths together with that passion. Problem is, if you don't have the skills and talents to match the passion, you won't be good. Like golfing, look at you as a golfer, Josh. You're passionate, you're not great, right? So we don't choose that as a career. So this is important stuff now. So beyond that, what you really need to do is look at that mission. Once you get your mission, because the problem is if we don't have a mission, we end up conforming to somebody else's mission. And what happens in that scenario is our identity is not congruent with that mission. And again, we said earlier, the most powerful force in the world is to have your beliefs and your identity congruent with your overall mission. So if you're driving to work every morning and you look at somebody in a car and they look miserable, just know that they're not fulfilled by that work because the mission that company is after, which may be a really good mission, doesn't align with that person's beliefs or identity. And that's huge. And guess what? That person could be making bank. That person could be taking home $250 a year, but success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And that's short term. And they could kill that for 10 years. But there's going to come a point where they're like, I can't sustain this model. Well, that's why. The answer is there. The problem is nobody really thinks about finding a way to do that or work with somebody to help them do that or even take 20 minutes of quiet time to go through that activity we just went through.
What's the end result of not of that person driving to work and never changing and they live their whole life that way? You probably see some pretty ugly scenarios. What's the end result?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in any scenario, Josh, our work doesn't define us. So although it's a large portion of our life, it doesn't define us. That being said, it's important. So what I find in those scenarios is, for example, maybe they have kids. Well, their kids are the reason they're here and they're here to help their kids. The problem is work becomes a strategy to support that overall goal to help their kids. It's not integrated, right? So if you choose to not find your passion and you choose to stay in a career path that you can tolerate, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means that you're probably not getting that sense of fulfillment that you could get if you were to pursue that. Because it is a tactic to meet another need. It's not a mission that you're serving while also still helping your kids or whatever you want to do on the side. It's possible to do more than that.
Well, I think people think that you can't have a well-rounded fulfillment in all of those areas. But the truth is, if you work hard enough, you find it, you can.
And that's where the limiting beliefs come in. We could sit there and say, do your top talents, skills, and passions, and then put that in intersection, and they could know exactly where they want to go, and they will still not let themselves get there. It could be as clear as day, and they could say, but I think honestly, it's all right to not be super fulfilled. And then it's where does that come from, right? And that's where you get into the whole wiring of how we believe these things. And it gets tough because a lot of times the people you're around have the same belief. And you've heard that before, right? We're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time around. If you're around people who believe that, man, those beliefs are getting so many references to where that is as strong as can possibly be. And you know how hard it is to get those references and build on that and try to break that? It gets dangerous. It really does. You got to be careful what you're taking in, who you're around. On the other side too, I would not be the one to sit here and say, quit everything you're doing, pursue your dream and just figure it out. There's people out there who say that. So it's well, how do you find that middle ground? And that's what we really look for whenever I coach somebody.
Let's talk about limiting beliefs for a minute. Are you running out of time? You good?
Now good. Let's go.
Let's talk about limiting beliefs because I hear that topic a lot. I feel like I deal with it a lot in my business with I'm working typically with a tech founder of a startup and they need to be able to step up to the plate and do some basic sales activities and things, which necessarily isn't in their always isn't in their nature. And I end up finding out when I watch them do their work, they actually are pretty good at some of the sales stuff. It just tells me that they've been telling themselves forever that they're not good at it and they're not a salesperson. What's your whole take on the limiting belief thing? How can people overcome it? Where do you start?
All right, 4 steps. It might be 4. I may mess this up. Let's talk through it. Number 1, identify your limiting beliefs. If you're true to yourself, you can identify them. Number 2, question where they came from. This is the wiring, right? This is the default mode. How did that happen? So if you have limiting beliefs, find out where those limiting beliefs came from and name it. That's it. Just name the situation and realize that that is not who you are. It was just a product of what somebody told you, how they felt at the moment, and you took that to heart. It's like the ultimate saying, like if you're a parent, never call your kid stupid. Like, and then like what are you, dumb? And then they leave the room crying and you're like, oh my God, I think I just messed them up for life. Like, and you go to that and it's like, that's their reference, right? So number 1, identify the disempowering beliefs. Number 2, question where they came from. Number 3, what you want to do is then create empowering beliefs. So flip those empowering beliefs. And these have to be stated in the positive, and they're going to be essentially beliefs that will help you get to where you want to go.
Example of that. Let's like dissect that.
All right. So I am not, give me your example. Say one more time on that. The tech.
Yeah. So you have a tech founder, and he's been a tech guy his whole life. He develops product. He's brilliant. He's an engineer by trade, and he feels like he doesn't like networking. He doesn't like being in a room full of people or communicating like that all the time.
That's his limiting belief. Okay, so what you can do is you can question where that came from. And I work with salespeople all the time. I just had a conversation last week about that. You want to hear the belief I got? Oh, this is great. My belief was that I heard from this individual was, well, I went to a networking event once and I was with a couple of my buddies, and one of my buddies left there with 100 friends. He worked the room and it was unbelievable. And then as a result, I felt like I could not network. That's real stuff though, right? Like, Let's be honest, Josh, like you would leave a room with 100 contacts. Does that mean that I leave with 5 quality ones that I cannot network? I mean, that's a lie. Let's call it for what it is. It's a lie. So that could be a situation. So when I say identify the disempowering, you just did that. I'm not good at networking. I'm in tech, or I'm an accountant, and that's not where I should be. Well, there's where one scenario came from. That's called an intense neurological experience. There's always those experiences that we have, that we feel, we can touch, like it's so close to us that we still hold on to that. Until you address that, it's irrelevant to move forward. And even naming it sometimes doesn't do it. You have to have somebody repeat, is that really a reflection of you? No. Is that really a reflection of you? Yeah, you're right. And then you go through that process. And then once you get that one out of the way, all right, let's look at the next. You see how this could drag out to a little bit of a coaching process. From there, you create an empowering belief and say something along the lines of, I have the ability to create incredible, genuine connections. Something that simple. Now what we need to do is reinforce that with references. So what you need to do in this scenario is actually get yourself in a position to experience success. And all you're doing, and Tony Robbins will talk about this, is if this is a table and it has no legs, it's wobbly, you're giving it legs. And one leg makes it a little stronger, 2 legs, 3 legs, 4 legs. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes back to you and he goes a year later, Josh, I am the best networker you've ever seen in your life. And you're like, one, you're pumped. But like, think about that. Like, yeah, exactly. That's the truth. But the problem is it's easy for us, if we're good at networking, to not take that approach. We jump to the solution. What do you mean you're bad? You're good. Go. Just get out there. Do what you need to do. And you're missing the boat. You're just you're just brushing over all the experiences they had that made that belief so ingrained in them. So then that 4th step is get references. Go, go, go. And you know that not every networking experience is going to be perfect, but if you get enough good ones, now all of a sudden it's confidence. And next thing you know, we completely flip the script on that. And it's like the most rewarding thing that I could picture in my entire life. That's what gets me going.
That's awesome. I think what probably holds people back, because I even have been here before with some of the negative thoughts I allow in my head sometimes, and I feel like I'm pretty good at this. But usually the hardest part about recognizing those limiting beliefs is because it's usually something really stupid. It's usually like in your head, you're like, I can't believe I actually think this way because I know it's crazy and stupid. You know what I mean? So like, I think it probably scares people off every now and then to really face that and deal
Yeah,
with it.
I mean, that is 100% true. It really is, because a lot of times, I mean, fears are definitely feelings. They're not facts. I mean, really, most fears, like you touch a hot stove, that's a fact, right? You're going to get burnt the second time. But one of my favorite quotes is, the coward dies 1,000 deaths, the brave man just one. And all that's saying is, you die 1,000 deaths in your head. None of that is true. Like none of it comes to fruition. The brave man doesn't even go through those 1,000 and just dies one, right? Like just does it. And it's crazy to think about that. But if you bring it back to childhood, it's like, Josh, Mom, there's a monster in the closet. There's a monster in the closet. Open the damn closet. There's no monster. All right, go to bed. Next. Like all you did was have a disempowering belief that you were going to die because there's a monster in the closet. Where that came from, I watched a movie, right? And then you just pull it out and bring it to reality, and there's your reference. All right, now I can go to bed. There's no monster in the closet. So yeah, that's a big one though. And then on that topic too, one of the biggest things, if you do run into that, or maybe if you're a manager and you run into somebody who has that limiting belief, is interrupting their pattern in a way. And people will be like, I'm stuck. Where are you stuck? You can move. Can you walk right now? Oh, you're stuck? Like just doing things like that, to where we use our vocabulary in a way with metaphors, it could get really bad. Of like, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, or I'm down a rabbit hole, or like these metaphors that I have a client who relates everything to athletics. And when you're working with anxiety and you're a perfectionist and something goes wrong and you in your head relate to it as a pick six, or you relate to it as a self-inflicted wound,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to sleep either at night. Think about the level of intensity that carries. Think about that. Oh, that was a self-inflicted wound. That's a gunshot. Like, I mean, in your head, and if you're a visual person, forget it. Like that's going to go in so deep. And when it comes to changing, that's when you need to say, that did happen. That's all right. We'll move on. That's that conditioning process. But it comes to vocabulary, metaphors, and everything.
I love it. And the vocabulary you tell your own self, right? Not that's what you talk to your friends about, right? The stuff you're saying in your own head.
Yeah, that's big. What's going on within your own head? And that's probably the biggest part of, honestly, coaching. If you just sit there and you listen to somebody, like one of my coaches said, just be a light post. And it's like that whole reference, like between me, you, and a light post or whatever. Like if you walked out of work every day, found a light post and talked to it, you'd probably feel better. Degrades my coaching services a little bit, but let's be honest, just get that out from here through your mouth and just listen to yourself. And that's where you're like, wow, that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? So
yeah. All right, well, speaking of your coaching services, we wrap this thing up. I mean, if I'm on the call right now listening to this podcast and I'm like, shoot, man, I'd like to work with Ryan or someone like Ryan. You know, how does someone find you, and where do you want to send them to?
Yes, so they can go a lot of times just to my Instagram here. So whether it's through DM, I have my website out there, ryanborawski.com. That's BORAWSKI.com. And you can get an appointment right on there, a free 60-minute call. And I think I told you this before, we just get into it. Like, yeah, of course, a little small talk, but we really want to try to meet your needs. So that'd be a really good way to do that as well. All my information is on there, email, everything. And again, it's really across the board. If you feel like you are not reaching your potential, let's get to work, because that's unacceptable.
That's awesome. And yeah, all right. So the folks listening to this, if you've made it to the end of this podcast, about 35, 40 minutes in, and you're still listening, we really appreciate you sticking it out to the end with us.
Thank you.
Please hop on either Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and share this podcast if it helped you at all with some folks, and tag Ryan and myself in it, and let us know maybe the biggest takeaway you took from it, and we'll try to hop in there and reply too if you have any other questions. But if there's anything else to get in touch with Ryan, again, we'll have his information tagged at the bottom of this podcast as well. Ryan, thanks for joining us, my man. This was awesome.
Hey, can we do this again sometime?
Yes.
Let's go.
We can do a second date for sure.
All right, Josh, I appreciate it.
All right, buddy.
See ya.